what allows us to do and has allowed me to do is to use the mountain bike to access places that you couldn't otherwise access because you can't get to them with a van. You can't get to them by foot because they're too far. So it's also a means of really exploring some of the most remote and incredible corners of the planet.
Episode 286, Mountain Biking in Beautiful Locations Around the World, with Mike Brcic. Support for the Adventure Sports Podcast comes from Kind Snacks. Go check them out at kindsnacks.com/adventure. There you'll get a 10-snack variety pack for just $10 with free shipping. They'll send you some dark chocolate nuts and sea salt, some roasted jalapeno almond bars, and some of my new favorites are the mango apple chia pressed bars. So check them out and let them know we sent you by going to kindsnacks.com/adventure. This episode is sponsored by Health IQ. If you're exercising regularly, don't you think you deserve a special rate on life insurance? Find out how much you can save by taking the health quiz for your adventure sport at healthiq.com/adventure. A few minutes on their site could save you a bunch on your life insurance. Get rewarded for all your hard work at healthiq.com/adventure. You're listening to the Adventure Sports Podcast, brought to you by 180 Tech. We talk with adventurers from around the globe to bring you the inspiration and motivation you need to get started in the outdoors or to keep you moving if you're already there. Now here's your host, Curt Linville.
Hi friends, thank you so much again for listening to the Adventure Sports Podcast. Today I have Mike Brcic with us. Mike is visiting today from Toronto, Canada. And Mike has an interesting story. He has had a lifetime of entrepreneurial ventures that are centered around his adventure sports that he loves, primarily mountain biking. But he has a long story about the journey that this has led him on, and I'm excited to hear it. He has a company, Sacred Rides, so you can learn more about what Mike has been up to at sacredrides.com while we're on the podcast today. But Mike, welcome to the program.
Really happy to be here, Curt. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. You know, it's always fun to talk about mountain biking. It's also fun to talk about Canada, and it's also fun to talk about learning how to make a living doing the sports you love to do. So I think this is going to be a great show. How about a little backstory? Where did you grow up, and how did you get into adventure sports?
I grew up in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I guess my first foray into quote-unquote adventure sports was probably canoe trips with my dad growing up. Ontario, as some people might know, is a bit of a canoe paradise. There's tons and tons of lakes here, and we used to come to a park called Killarney Park, which is about 4 hours north of Toronto, and it's just a real jewel and just stunning, beautiful landscape. Then we used to every summer come for 2 or 3 weeks and just hang out in the wilderness. And that, I guess, that sort of engendered in me this love for the outdoors and love for exploring and adventure. And that's stuck with me to this day. And my dad's no longer with us, but that's probably his most enduring legacy is just that love of the outdoors and love of exploring and adventure. For me, and I guess that that was the first foray, but from then it's grown into all kinds of different adventures and adventure sports from there.
Okay, well, what kind of adventure sports do you most enjoy? I know if you're like a lot of adventurers, you could make a list as long as your arm, but the question I have is, what are your top 3 or 4?
Yeah, well, these days I have 3 young kids. I have 2 6-year-olds and a 9-year-old. And that really limits the amount of time I can devote to adventuring. But now I'm getting my kids into mountain biking, and mountain biking is still to this day my favorite way to get out there. And so that's a big one for me. Surfing, I don't get to do it very often, but whenever I travel, I love to be near an ocean and get out on a surfboard, and I kind of suck at it, and I've never really devoted. And like most people, surfing's got a crazy learning curve, and unless you devote a few weeks in a row to really, my experience at least, and a few of my friends, unless you can devote a few weeks in a row to it to really sort of develop that muscle memory and the timing on the wave and that kind of stuff. I typically do, 2 or 3 days at a time, maybe between trips. We obviously don't live very close to the ocean, although I have heard there's a good lake wave here in just outside of Toronto. But surfing is a big one. and yeah, canoeing still. I do a lot of not a lot, but every year I do. There's a few friends we go on a 5 or 6 day whitewater canoe trip. So just love, and that sort of took my love when I used to go canoeing with my dad. It was generally flat water canoeing on lakes and with big portages sometimes. And now, about 10 years ago, discovered whitewater canoeing, which is everything I loved about canoeing: the solitude, the wilderness, but this whole element of adrenaline thrown in, minus these big, long, crazy portages. And when you take out the portages, it means you can pile on way more. You don't have to eat freeze-dried food. And so when we go, we have these big steaks, and we have wine, and we have whiskey, and all these things that we would never do on a typical backcountry flatwater trip. So I love it, and as my kids get older, I'm going to start taking them on these whitewater trips as well. So that's sort of the main bag of adventures for me.
Let's visit just a little bit about the whitewater canoeing, because we've not talked a lot about that on the show, and we're not going to spend a huge amount of time on that because that's not really what we're here to talk about today. But are you using a whitewater canoe or more of a standard canoe?
No, we're using whitewater canoes, and they're open boats. They're not, in the world of whitewater canoeing, you can go whole hog, and you can get these, you can get a skirt that fits over top of the boat, and allows you to tackle big water because you're not bigger water because you're not taking water into the boat. But we typically just do open canoes, and the limitation with that is when you start doing bigger stuff like class 3. And maybe we do short stretches of class 4, you tend to take on a lot of water, and when you're loaded down with these big fat steaks and wine and whiskey and all that kind of stuff, you take on a little bit of water, all of a sudden you start to get very unstable. So but that's kind of something we're not really willing to compromise, because it's just as much about the experience when we're not on the river as it is on the river. And maybe if we develop our skills a bit more, we might start tackling bigger stuff. But we've all got kids, and we don't really want to do anything too crazy. It's just
Sure.
about getting out. Yeah.
Do you use float bags to fill up the front and rear of the canoe and then kneel in the middle? Or are you just open?
No, we have float bags. Yeah, and we've got the thigh straps and the whole deal. So we're sort of advanced hobbyists, I guess. We're certainly not, the real crazy folks out there doing like the class 4 and 5 stuff. But we tackle some pretty good stuff.
That sounds like a ton of fun, I tell you. So if you take the steaks and the wine and everything else out of the canoe, can you do a roll?
We've attempted it. That's pretty hard to do with two people in a canoe. Yeah, no, it's generally, if we tip, we're getting out of that boat pretty quickly.
Yeah, I have seen whitewater canoeists that do roll, but usually it's an empty boat. Maybe it does have the spray skirt on it, and it's a one-person canoe with a good rocker. And I've seen people pull it off. I tell you, when I used to whitewater kayak, when I saw a whitewater canoeist go by, I was like, oh, because those guys, that's tough stuff. That's really tough stuff.
It is, yeah. And what I love about it is you generate, you develop a real appreciation for rivers and water dynamics, and how, just like you would with a kayak. But with a kayak, you can get away with more, because it's you can be a little bit sloppy with your technique, and if you go over, it's relatively easy to pull a roll. With a canoe, when you dump, all your stuff is probably going to dump out of the canoe, and if it's a long stretch of rapids, you're going to be swimming a long way. You're going to be chasing your stuff, and your stuff might end up a kilometer down the river. So you really have to get good at how to read rivers. So typically, when we're doing anything that's beyond a class 2, we're going to get out and we're going to walk every inch of that rapid, and we're going to talk about how we're going to approach each section of river and what we're going to do. And I just love that. I just geek out on that stuff, and love sort of analyzing and dissecting a river, and how it's going to push the boat, and where it's going to take us, and how we're going to react. And then, of course, as they say, best laid plans and so forth.
Right.
You get on the river, and it's like everything you've talked about all of a sudden something pushes you off course and like, oh, new plan, time to
Surprise.
adjust. Yeah, and then I just love that feeling of, okay, we got to improvise, and the adrenaline's flowing, and you're making super fast decisions on the fly, and you're having to communicate with your partner, and it's just it's just a lovely dance of trying to stay afloat and working with each other and working with the river. And
Yeah, wow. You're in the right place for it. Ontario is amazing. When I went through Ontario, it seemed to me, this is my memory, my impression, that every hilltop was a forest and every valley was a lake. You know, it was just so beautiful. So beautiful.
yeah, we actually there are some good rivers in Ontario. We've pretty much done them all. The ones that you can do like a multi-day whitewater trip, but we've also done a lot in Quebec. And Quebec is just east of us, and it's a whitewater canoe paradise there. There's tons of amazing rivers there, and we've just scratched the surface of what's available there. You could spend a lifetime exploring.
I have to ask, because I know that some of our listeners are going to be curious. Mike, we have listeners from around the planet. Nearly every nation on Earth downloads our show, which is really, really cool. But not all of them know about Canada very well. So the question I have is, how long is your canoe season, and how cold are the winters?
So canoe season, that depends on how much you're willing to suffer. And if you don't mind cold water and you don't mind big water, you could start as early as beginning of April, depending on what how things are melting, stuff like that. But if you go out in April, you're probably going to be facing some huge water, or you'll be dealing with snow. And maybe even in sections of flat water, you might have some ice. And then you get into May, and May can often be really big water as well. But May is blackfly season, and boy, can that ever be ferocious.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about drive you straight to the loony bin. It can get really bad, and you'll wear a bug net, but then you might have a tiny little 1-inch section of exposed skin, and you'll have 20 blackfly bites there, and you'll be bleeding all over the place. So we tend to go end of June, July kind of thing, and it's lower water, maybe not quite as exciting, but very few bugs. And you could go straight into October, end of October, if you want to do that, but probably most rivers, you're going to be facing sections where you're going to be getting out of the boat and dragging your boat. And in terms of winters, I guess not. I think winter in Toronto is probably not too different from winter in Denver. Maybe a little bit less snow than Toronto doesn't get a lot of snow. If you go farther, a few hours north of the city, we get a lot of snow, and the winters are pretty mild here. I would say, let's see if I convert that to Fahrenheit. Maybe a cold day might be 25 Fahrenheit, but usually hovering around freezing kind of thing. So. But certainly, there's plenty of places in Canada you can go where it's winter can get pretty nasty.
Right. Well, that's cool. So around Toronto itself, more mild. Sounds like it's a lot more doable, and you have a decent season for canoeing. So awesome, man. Hey, friends, Curt here. We might have the healthiest audience of any podcast on the planet. I don't know. It just seems to me that people that are out there doing adventure sports have to be pretty healthy. They appreciate being healthy, and they love to get out there and move. And we recently got a new sponsor, Health IQ, and they reward people who love to be healthy. This is cool stuff. So, do you exercise 5 times a week? If so, then you probably think you deserve a different rate on your life insurance. You're not the smoker. You're not the one who's out there abusing his or her body and having a lot of health issues that result. Instead, you're out there moving and eating right and doing right things. So shouldn't your premiums be lower? Health IQ uses science and data to secure special rates on life insurance for health-conscious people like cyclists, runners, strength trainers, vegans, and more. Matter of fact, research shows that those who frequently exercise with some intensity have a 22% lower cancer risk, a 56% lower heart disease risk, and up to a 34% lower risk of an early death. So why not get rewarded for that? Historically, you get penalized for your family history, body mass index, and other attributes, but you don't get rewarded for your health conscious lifestyle. Well, Health IQ does reward you for your health conscious lifestyle with special rates on life insurance. How cool is that? To get more information and a free quote, go to healthiq.com/adventure and make sure you do use that /adventure. That makes sure that they know where you heard about them on the Adventure Sports Podcast. So healthiq.com/adventure. Let's go back a little bit. You said to me before we started up that after growing up in Toronto, you made your way to Fernie, British Columbia, which is a ski town, and you went there. Why did you go there? What's the story behind that?
Well, there is the story of when I went there, when I was actually going out there, and there's the story of that I kind of tell myself that I've realized what really happened when I went out there. And when I went there, as I was telling you, the day after my last exam at university, I had an old green Volvo station wagon, and I packed it up with all my stuff, my skis and my bike and my guitar, and I just drove out west. It was about 2,200 miles, and 3 days later, ended up in Fernie, BC. And really, at the time, it was just I knew I didn't want to work in my field. I'd gotten a degree in economics and history, and I didn't really see what I was going to do with either of those things. So I just thought, I'm going to become a ski bum, and for a year, and then I'll figure out quote unquote real life. And
Right.
that sort of sent me down this the path that I'm on to this day. A lifetime devoted to adventure. But becoming older and wiser, I'm 46 now. Looking back at that, it was more of an escape than anything. Just leaving things behind that were troubling me, or and as they say, wherever you go, there you are, and you can only run away from your troubles for so long until they catch up to you.
Right.
And that stuff pulled me back to Toronto about 11 years ago.
So how long were you in Fernie? Sounds like a long time.
Yeah, a decade, almost to the day.
Wow, 10 years. And Fernie sounds like a cool place, too. Describe what that's like there.
Yeah, Fernie is sort of your classic Rocky Mountain ski town. Not too dissimilar to a lot of ski towns in Colorado. I visited a lot of towns in Colorado. It historically has had a resource base, so coal mining, forestry, that kind of stuff. And then beginning in I would say sort of mid to late 80s, the ski hill, it was just a little family ski hill back then, but the owner started to develop it. And then in the late 90s, it got bought out by a larger company that really started to put a lot of money into the ski hill and really opened up a lot of terrain and new amenities, new chairlifts, that kind of stuff. And it really, back in the late 90s, early 2000s, it really started to develop a reputation in the ski world, and it got tons of coverage in the press. The ski hill is truly an amazing ski hill, and it is blessed with a ton of snow. I think the average is over 30 feet of snow a year, so it's really known for amazing powder skiing and these big, wide open bowls that if you love skiing powder and if you love skiing fast, you can just open it up in there. And when I first moved there, it was starting to get really well known for skiing, but summer was really the off season. Tumbleweeds would be going down Main Street in the summer, and then gradually over time, it has started to develop a real reputation as a summer sports paradise, adventure sports paradise. Incredible mountain biking, incredible hiking. There's great whitewater on the Elk River and other rivers around there. Fly fishing, you name it. It's tiny. It's only 6,000 people, and it's quite isolated. It's 3 hours from Calgary, and in one direction. In the other direction, it's an hour to Cranbrook, which is not much of a bigger town. So it's quite a isolated and very lovely little community.
And it sounds like you must have done a lot of mountain biking around there too.
Oh boy, did I did I ever? I started my company the summer after I moved there in September of '95, and I started my company the following spring. And those early years, I was guiding, I was cooking, I was on every single trip. So I was probably putting in over 100 days, and most of those pretty full days on my mountain bike. Um, just riding tons, and not just around Fernie, but all over the province, and exploring and trying to find new areas and new trails. And yeah, I logged a lot of miles on my bike.
Well, that's really cool. I'd like to spend some time on mountain biking because you sound like the kind of person that could really give us a lot of good tips and a lot of good stories about mountain biking. So let's dive into that a little bit.
So I my third year of university, I think that would have been 1993, I guess I want to say something like that. I grew up just gaga about biking in general. When I was a little kid, I, my parents got me a bike, and then they said you can take this bike on our street, and you can bike on our street, but we don't want you to go anywhere else. And our street was about 100 yards long, and I
Uh,
used to I used to bike up and down the street for hours at a time, and my neighbors thought I was totally weird because here's this little kid who would just spend 2-3 hours biking up and down the same street. But I was just nuts about it, and I didn't actually put a foot on a mountain bike until my third year of university, and that was kind of the late '80s, early '90s. That was when mountain biking was really starting to hit the mainstream, and I heard about this thing, and I just thought, geez, this is amazing. Wilderness, the outdoors, plus cycling, what a match made in heaven. And so I decided I was going to get a mountain bike, but I couldn't really afford a full mountain bike, or at least I didn't think I could. And so I got a mountain bike magazine, and there was an ad there was those the mail order bike companies in the back of the magazine, and I found a company that I thought looked good, and I found a frame, a bike frame. I couldn't afford a whole bike, so I ordered a frame, and it was a company called Balance, which is no longer in business. But a week later, a frame showed up, and so I put that on the wall, and I hung the frame up on the wall. And then a few weeks later, when I had a little bit more money, I ordered a set of forks, and back then they were like 1-inch travel forks, and yeah, and gradually. And I think it took probably about 4 or 5 months before I finally got the whole bike. Towards the end, I had this full bike, but there was no seat and no pedals because I couldn't afford those. And in hindsight, probably a really dumb way to buy a bike because you end up paying way more that way. But I built it from scratch, and the first time I got on that thing, I was just hooked. And
wow.
and I think about a year later or so, I was on my way out to Fernie, and that really, when I got to the Rockies and discovered mountain biking in real mountains, that was it. It was like crack cocaine. I was hooked.
Well, that's kind of fun, though, because you learn so much about bike maintenance and the components of the bike because you're putting it together. So, what a fun way to get into it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I like that spin on it.
Okay, so you've been doing mountain biking for a long time and you've even made it a big part of your career. So, we got to ask you a few questions about just what is mountain biking all about. And we've covered this on the show a little bit, but for listeners who haven't heard it, they're going to love this. How is mountain biking different from just your everyday riding a bike somewhere?
This ties into the name of my company, Sacred Rides, which I can get deeper into that story, but it refers to this day I had in Peru, which to this day, is one of the best days I've ever had on a bike or any sport. And what mountain biking allows you to do, when you've got a bike that you can go off road, you can get away from pavement, you can get away from cars, you can get deep into the wilderness, and you can really get to some amazing places. You get to places where it's just you and the forest or the mountain or wherever it is, and nothing else. And the other thing, especially if you're riding a more technical trail, is you're forced to focus 100% on what you're doing. And because if you don't, you're going to end up on your butt, or worse yet. Um, and so you have to focus 100% on the trail and what it is that you're doing, and it really sharpens your mind. And rock climbers will know what I'm talking about, and kayakers, and any sport where there's an element of adrenaline or danger that forces you to really focus your attention. And that is, to me, extremely meditative, because I don't have the luxury of thinking about my mortgage or my kids or a million other responsibilities. It's just me and totally living in the present moment. And I meditate as well, and I meditate every morning, and I've been doing it for years. I find, for me to get into that state of present awareness is a million times easier on a mountain bike. And I just love that feeling of being completely in the present moment and being out in the wilderness. And for my company, what we do is we create these experiences and these trips all over the world. And what allows us to do, and has allowed me to do, is to use the mountain bike to access places that you couldn't otherwise access, because you can't get to them with a van. You can't get to them by foot because they're too far. So it's also a means of really exploring some of the most remote and incredible corners of the planet.
Wow. So that's why you have the name Sacred Rides.
Well, it refers to an experience that, to me, was extremely sacred, not in any sort of religious sense, and it also happened to take place in the Sacred Valley of Peru.
Oh, cool.
And it just brought together all these elements of what I feel constitutes something sacred.
Right. So now you guide others so that they can have similar experiences. Do you find that people, when they're, I guess, less familiar with a mountain bike, maybe they're learning more about how to ride, do they also get into the zone like you're talking about? Do you get to share that experience with them?
Maybe even more so, because I've been doing it for so long. I've gotten pretty skilled at it, and so it's relatively easy for me to just kind of, most of the trails that I'll ride around here, kind of cruise my way through them, and they don't push me that much, and so I'm not forced to focus as much as I might, on a more difficult trail where I really have to focus. So, but when you're a beginner and you're just starting out, you're being tested, and you've got to focus on what you're doing, and it really sharpens the senses and the attention. And also, I want to be careful here that I'm not painting this picture of mountain biking as this crazy, deadly sport, because the sport has a bit of an image problem. And most people, when they think of mountain biking, if they've never done it, they probably see posters or videos of, some young guy doing a backflip off a cliff in Utah or something like that. And certainly there's people who do that, but that's 0.1% of the people who mountain bike. And most people are out there just having a good time in the forest, out in on the mountains, wherever. Their wheels are on the ground at all times. And so I don't want to paint this overly, dangerous or a crazy picture of the sport. It's been years since I had a bad fall. And every now and then when I go out, I might have a little fall, and I'll get an abrasion on my knee or something like that. But that's pretty much it. But we used to run these mountain bike camps in the Don Valley here in Toronto, and we had different levels. But I used to always work with the beginners, and I just loved it, because they would come into it, really hesitant and a little bit scared, and we would meet every week for 6 weeks, and by the end of it, they're just chock full of confidence. They've learned these incredible skills on a mountain bike, and I would get people telling me, like, thank you so much for helping me learn this sport and develop my confidence, and it's carried over into the rest of my life. I've developed confidence to tackle other areas of my life, and that's just really cool to see when that happens.
Yeah, and in addition to that, I have to say that when people find a very active sport, which mountain biking is, that they can really plug into, that they love, that will call them out of the everyday to go do more of that sport, then, man, it makes them healthier. It gives them a really good reason to get out and move. And even when they can't mountain bike, it's a motivator to get in better and better shape, so when they can mountain bike, they'll have that much more fun. So I just love adventure sports, the way that they do that. It's awesome when you can add that into your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Sacred Rides. So you do training, you do guiding. Do you provide equipment, or do people bring their own stuff? How does that work?
Well, well, let me correct you a little bit.
Okay.
We don't really do mountain bike training. I mean, we do on all of our trips. You know, our main thing we do is these 5 to 14 day mountain bike adventures around the world. Um, in a lot of our trips, we will, you know, we'll start the trip off with an hour or two of just, you know, reviewing skills, stuff like that. It's not, you know, we don't really have a formalized program in place to provide mountain bike training. Our guides are generally quite skilled. Many of them have instructor certificates, and they'll offer hints and tips along the way. But it's not, you know, we don't offer proper mountain bike training. And there's plenty of other places you can go if you know if what you're looking to do is really boost your skills. But you know, mostly is what we do is these adventures around the world. And you know, unfortunately, I don't really do any guiding or anything like that anymore. The company's grown, and I've got 3 kids, and I stay close to home. But yeah, what we do is we put together these fully all-inclusive packages. You just have to get to the starting point. You know, for instance, in Peru, you just got to get to Lima. We're going to pick you up at the airport, and for the next 10 days, we'll take care of everything: your lodging, your food, the guides, the transportation, cold beers at the end of every day, you know, interesting cultural experiences, all that kind of stuff. You don't have to think about anything except riding your brains out and having an amazing cultural experience alongside this mountain bike experience. So that's really what we're looking to do, is just give people just the adventure of a lifetime on every trip that we run.
That sounds fantastic. I love the sound of that. Now, do people bring their own bikes, or are the bikes provided, or both?
Um, so about 2/3 of our customers bring their own bike. Simply, you know, if they're going somewhere for a week or 10 days, they want to be on a ride that's familiar. And about a third people, whether they've, you know, never packed up a bike and they don't feel like going through the hassle, or maybe they're traveling, you know, sticking around for a week or two after their bike trip and they don't want to lug their bike around, people rent as well. And we have really high quality rentals available in every location.
Awesome. So, how skilled do you have to be before you could be on one of these rides?
Good question. The um, the majority of our trips are kind of fall in the strong intermediate to advanced range. So you don't have to be a pro mountain biker by any stretch of the imagination. It does have to be, you know, a regular something that you do regularly. It's not just, you know, once or twice a year I go out mountain biking with my cousin, something like that. It's like, you know, you're the type of person. It's one of your top 3 outdoor kind of pursuits, and you're active and you're fit and you like to get out there and explore. And we do have a few trips that are, you know, really advanced level, like our Moab trip, for instance. That's a pretty advanced level trip. But then we also have a line of trips. They're called our Explorer trips, and those are more for the strong beginner, intermediate level riders. So you could go on a trip like that if you've never mountain biked before, but you know, you better be pretty fit and adventurous and willing to be challenged. And you know, challenge is a core element of all of the trips that we offer. We want people to experience the thrill and the learning and the growth that comes with a challenge, whether it's a physical challenge or you're being technically challenged on your mountain bike. And you know, our guides are extremely good at helping people sort of explore and push their limits without pushing them too far. And when you start, you know, bumping up against your limits, that's when you really start to see growth. You start to be able to do new things on a mountain bike. You start to develop confidence that spills over into other areas of your life. And that's really, you know, one of the main goals is we want people to have an amazing mountain bike trip. We want them to have an amazing adventure experience, but we also want them to have somewhat of a transformative experience. So when they come back, they don't come back the exact same person that they were when they went on the trip.
Oh, I love that. I love that theme. I love that approach. And it's really what adventure sports are all about. I think that's one of the biggest benefits of adventure sports is that you learn so much about yourself and you are challenged and you do grow. And so cool, man. So what about lodging? I know that people have these questions. Just real quickly, do you camp? Do you stay in hotels? What can you expect?
No camping. We back in the day when I first started the company, we did camping trips. And you know, camping was fine when we were running 3 or 4 trips a year. You know, back then our season was end of June through the beginning of September, and maybe we would run 3 or 4 trips, and that was fine. But then we started to get busier, and we were running a lot of back-to-back trips. And the life of a guide on one of our trips back then was get up at 6 in the morning, start cooking breakfast. The customers, clients would get up 7:30. They'd have some breakfast. They'd go hit the trails around 8:30, and then come back and cook dinner. And often, doing dishes until 11 o'clock or midnight, and camp cleanup and stuff like that. And that's fine if you do a week, maybe 2 weeks. But once you start doing, 2 or 3 trips in a row, it was just burning everybody out, and they just couldn't keep that up. And also, our customers said, "Hey, I like this camping thing, but at the end of the day, I want to come back to a nice hot shower, and I want to have a nice big comfortable bed to sleep in." So we stopped doing camping back then, and there's all kinds of different lodging on our trips. There's these beautiful backcountry lodges. There's B&Bs. There, one thing you won't find on any of our trips is motels or chain hotels, anything like that. We always select unique places that have some local character, and we want the lodging to be part of the overall experience and part of the overall story. So we're often finding unique, quirky places. Sometimes the owners are real, adventure sports enthusiasts, or they're characters in their own right, and they kind of enhance the experience. So that's always a key consideration when we're choosing the lodging. And sometimes we have no choice. If we're in a remote valley and there's only one place, that's where we'll stay. But often we'll be quite careful about the lodging we select.
That makes it even more fun. How cool is that? So what countries do you operate in?
So we're in Canada. We're in the United States. We have trips in Moab and California. Utah and California. We got trips outside of Moab in Utah. Guatemala, Peru. We're in the Argentinian side of Patagonia. We have trips in the Azores, just in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Switzerland and Italy, Slovenia and Croatia, Nepal and New Zealand, and our newest trip is in Greenland. It's a fat biking trip in Greenland.
Wow. So I tried to get all of that jotted down because I was really curious. I'm going to go over it again just for fun. Canada, U.S., which is Moab and California, Peru, Argentina, Guatemala, the Azores, Switzerland, Italy, Nepal, New Zealand, and even Greenland.
And Croatia and Slovenia. Pretty good, though.
Croatia and Slovenia. Holy cow. So people could literally see the world on your trips. They could select where they want to go explore a place. And with your help and with your guides, they can do it from a mountain bike. I love that.
Yeah, and with our new Getaways program, we're rapidly expanding that list. We're all kinds of places all over the world we haven't been in before, and if that keeps going the way it's going, we'll have trips in almost every country on Earth in the next few years.
Oh, that is cool. So your business is growing and expanding, and new horizons, new locations. Let's talk a little bit about what it means to be an adventure sports entrepreneur. It sounds like you have lived that life for a while. I'd love to hear about your journey. How can people get an adventure-focused lifestyle?
Well, I guess, my story is somewhat interesting. When I moved to Fernie, I got a job as a liftie at the local ski hill. And within a few weeks, I got fired. I won't go too deep into the reasons for that, but shortly after that, I got a job as the day shift bartender at a bit of a rough and tumble miners bar, and within I think about 3 months, I got fired from that as well. And I realized that I didn't exactly make a great employee, and that maybe my path lay in creating something of my own for myself. And I was walking along the river trail in Fernie one day with a couple friends, and sort of pondering. I'd just gotten fired from the bartending job, and pondering what I was going to do next. And my friend said, "Well, you're totally nuts about mountain biking, and there's all these trails around here, and they're kind of hard to find, and maybe people will pay you to show them around on the local trails." And I kind of thought, "Oh, that's interesting." But then, he planted a bit of a seed. And that seed grew over the next few weeks, and I thought, damn, that's a good idea. And I managed to convince another friend to join me as my partner, and he left about year 5, and and we started a company. We got a $10,000 loan, and we bought a fleet of bikes, and we had enough money to create some brochures and hang up a sign on the highway. And back then, it was 1996. It was still very early days of the internet, but we got a pretty crappy looking website up. Um, but it took a few years to get any traction with that. Um, but these days, just to give you an example of what it was like advertising in that day, we spent a good chunk of our money on these little ads in the back of Outside Magazine. And it, it, back in the day, this was really pre websites existed, but nobody really used them.
Right.
And so you wouldn't advertise your website in the ad. You'd put call 1-800 whatever, or circle 123 on your reader card if you want more information. And readers would have this card that came with the magazine, and the ads and the companies they were interested, they would circle the appropriate number on the card, and they would mail it into Outside. Then Outside would take all of those cards that come in, and they would compile, all of the 123s, and they would send us a list of all the people, their name and addresses that wanted more information. Then we would take that list, and this list was just typed out on a piece of paper, and we would mail catalogs to all of these people. And that would sometimes take 6 to 8 weeks between when they circled that number and when they actually got a catalog.
Wow.
So not the most efficient way to get people information back then, but we still eventually managed to make it fly. But these days, wow, like the tools that are available to people to start a business, just incredible. Look at a tool like Kickstarter, where you don't even have to have a business. You can just have an idea, and you can put it online and see, do people like this idea? Maybe you want to do you want to start pioneering adventure trips on the moon or something like that. You can spend $500, create a semi snazzy video, put that online, and 30 days later you've got $500,000 in funding in your account because people just love the idea. And you can get a Squarespace website for $10 a month that looks super professional, and all these amazing tools available to you. So there's really, if you're into adventure and you have an idea, and it's been kind of bubbling around in the back of your mind for a little while, you really have no excuse. It's so easy to try out a new idea. And the tools available, through social media, stuff like Kickstarter, web, whatever, there's so much stuff out there to help you find people that are into the same things that you're into.
Very fun. So how long did it take before you said, okay, I've got an income that I can live with and I can get on with life now?
Oh boy. So back then, in the late 90s, I think it was 1998, I bought my first house. And I bought it for $91,000. And I generally had a couple roommates that would pay most of my mortgage. And I had sponsors that were giving me free bikes. And ski passes at the ski hill were on average about $400 for season's pass. So my cost of living was really low. And back then, my motivation was just, live sort of the classic ski bum, dirtbag life, and I didn't need a lot of money. I just wanted to ski all winter, and I wanted to be on my mountain bike the whole summer. So I really didn't need a lot of money. And I sort of approached my business the same way. I wasn't really that motivated to hustle and get a lot of money out of it. It was supporting my lifestyle, and I was having a lot of fun doing it. And it grew, despite my lack of serious effort. It grew over the years. But it wasn't until after about 10 years, I ended up moving back to Toronto. And it wasn't until, and then a couple of years after that, I had my first child. This was back in 2008. My daughter was born. And that will get you serious in a hurry.
Right.
And that's when I started realizing, hey, if I'm going to continue doing this, I'd better start hustling, and I better start learning, figuring out how to do this thing called entrepreneurship. So it was within a year or two of that, it was earning enough that I could have a full, and I didn't have to do other things. And up until those first couple of years in Toronto, I was doing other stuff on the side in the off season. But then shortly after, started adding international trips, and then our season went from being mid to end of June to early September back then to now. It's fully year-round season. We offer trips every month of the year and almost every week of the year.
Wow. So you've really put in your time and learned a lot of lessons about how to build an adventure-focused lifestyle, how to be an entrepreneur in the adventure space. Do you help other people along the way? Because I'm sure that there are others that would like to do something, but they don't want to necessarily take that amount of time to get there.
I do, yeah. For the last 6 years or so, I've been doing quite a lot of stuff on the side, from workshops to boot camps to one-on-one consulting, all that kind of stuff. And the two primary groups that I work with people who want to start or want to grow a business in the adventure travel space. And I also work with social entrepreneurs. So entrepreneurs who want to start a business that doesn't just have a financial mandate, but there's a social mandate to it as well. And and if anybody wants to know more about, I don't, because I'm busy with a lot of other stuff, I don't do a lot of that anymore, but I do have a few people that I work with on a limited basis. And if you go to MikeBrcic.com, BRCIC, you can find more info about my consulting.
BRCIC. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're missing a couple of vowels in that name there.
I think so, yeah.
BRCIC. I love it. Brcic. Okay,
Yeah.
MikeBrcic.com, and people can get more information.
Hey guys, this is Travis. I'd like to talk for a moment about Kind Snacks. Kind recently became a sponsor of the Adventure Sports Podcast, and we are stoked to have them with us because Curt and I were Kind customers long before they became sponsors of the show. We truly do buy Kind bars to throw in our hydration packs for a mountain bike ride or our backpacks when we're out on the trail. We grab Kind Snacks instead of others because we can actually pronounce the ingredients on the back of the package, and they all taste awesome. You guys need to take advantage of the deal they're giving our listeners. Simply go to kindsnacks.com/adventure to get a 10-bar sampler case for just $10. Think about it. That's only $1 a bar. Then, because we know you're going to love them and you're going to go back for your second order, Kind is going to give you your $10 back by discounting your second order. That's a no-brainer, so don't wait. Go get your 10-bar sampler case now. Go to kindsnacks.com/adventure. All right, I'll let Curt get back into the interview. Guys, don't wait. Go check out that deal.
By now, you certainly know who Bent Gate is. That's for a great reason. Bent Gate Mountaineering has been sponsoring the Adventure Sports Podcast almost from the beginning, and we really appreciate that. They've made it possible for all the great shows to continue coming your way. We want to say thanks by reminding you to go to them for your backcountry gear. If you live in Colorado, then just stop by their store in Golden. If not, go to bentgate.com. They have what you need, from the latest ultralight gear to the tried and true classics for climbing, hiking, and camping, like Arc'teryx, Hilleberg, Nemo, Western Mountaineering, and many more. Need advice? They have you covered there too. Their staff are passionate adventurers who can offer help from their own experiences. Bentgate also hosts lots of events and speakers. Check out their website to see the schedule and to see all of their products. Help take care of the Adventure Sports Podcast by getting your gear from Bentgate Mountaineering. Well, thanks for giving back again. Just out of curiosity, if someone has a good idea, they're willing to work hard at it, and they're going to plug in with you to get those, I guess, startup tricks so that they can move things along more quickly. And let's just assume that they're on the road to success. How long do you think it takes to develop a business you can live with?
I mean, that really varies, and it really depends on the person. I often say, and I've worked with hundreds of people over the years, and the number one thing that really I think is the contributing factor to success. It has nothing to do with the idea or the product or the industry or your capital. It really has to do with the entrepreneur and their resilience and their ability to endure pain, because there's going to be pain along the way. And if you are somebody who gets easily thrown off course by difficulty, or difficulties, you're going to have a hard time in this world. And even though there's all these tools out there that make it so much easier to be an entrepreneur, everybody else has access to those same tools. So the competition is fierce. And, back when I started my company, there was pretty much, this is 21 years ago. There's hardly anybody doing in the entire world that was doing what we were doing, which was, these week-long trips specifically for mountain bikers and doing actual proper mountain biking. Now there's hundreds and hundreds of companies all over the world, maybe thousands, doing this thing. So it is easier to get into it, but you also, if you really want to sort of reach that, that level where you can make this a full-time thing, you've got to be willing to hustle, and you've got to be willing to persist and be able to endure pain and suffering along the way.
So it takes a lot of tenacity.
It does. To answer your question, if you have what we call in the entrepreneurial world good product market fit, i.e. you've developed a product or service that the world actually needs and wants, and you understand who your customer is, you can very quickly become successful and profitable with this. So, my latest venture, which is something called Mastermind Adventures, very quickly has caught on because it addresses a real need in the market in a very specific niche focused customer base. And I guess that that would be one piece of advice I would give people if they're looking to break into the adventure space, or maybe they've already got an adventure travel company but they're struggling to get it off the ground, is go really narrow. Focus on a very small customer base and get to know them really well, and create something that really addresses well a specific problem that they're having. Maybe it's adventure trips for people with disabilities, water-based trips for people with disabilities, for instance. There's probably not a lot out there like that, and there's probably a lot of people who would be into that. And when you get really narrow focus, it's a lot easier. You know who the customer is, and it's a lot easier to find them, and it's a lot easier to know what it is that they want and what are some of the problems they're facing, and then hence you can really tailor it to them. And you do that, you get people begging for your product, your service, and from there you can branch out, and you can expand into adjacent markets or adjacent customer bases. But too often I see people start really, really broad, and they think, I don't want to exclude people. But when you try to be everything to everybody, then you end up being nothing to anyone. So that's one piece of advice I would give, is like really, really hone in and don't be afraid to have a really narrow niche focus.
Wow, that's a good word. So how do you apply that principle with your sacred rides?
We've developed 4 different product lines, and each of them occupies a different section of the website. So they're very clearly delineated, and they serve different markets. So we have our core product is our single track rides, and those are for skilled, experienced mountain bikers. I mentioned the Explorer rides, which are people who are just starting to get into the sport. We have a line of women's trips, so they are women only, and that addresses a particular concern women were having, reflective of the demographics of mountain biking, which is a heavily male-dominated sport. We would get women coming on our trips, and they would say, "I really love the trip. The guys are incredible, but I was the only woman among 8 guys, or maybe there was only 2 of us, among 10 or something like that." And sometimes that can get a little bit of a competitive kind of testosterone thing. And not that women don't like that, but some women just want to get out there, and they just, they don't want to have to compete or anything like that. So we developed this line of women's only trips that addressed a very specific need, and that line has done very well for us. And then finally, we have what we call our Bring Your Partner trips. So we noticed that a lot of our customers were, excuse me, typically guys in their 40s or even their 50s, and they had partners, a wife or a girlfriend that didn't mountain bike, but they couldn't really spare time away from home and not bring their partner with them. And so people were asking, could I bring my wife on this trip with me? And back then we didn't back then we didn't really have a way to address that. So we developed a line of trips. So the idea is, if you're a mountain biker, whether you're a woman or a man, you go on this trip, you bring your partner, and if they don't mountain bike, then we have a separate itinerary for him or her. And that could be stuff like hiking, whitewater rafting, cultural excursions, stuff like that. Stuff where you don't necessarily need a lot of skill, but then there's also some time together during the trip as well. So that is also starting to really take off nicely. So you look at these things and they've got a niche focus. We're not just trying to create these kind of general mountain bike trips for just anybody, because there's just too much of that out there.
Right. Oh, I love it, man. So where do I sign up?
Yeah, sacredrides.com.
Sacredrides.com.
Or you can send an email to ride@sacredrides.com, and our man Nate can help you sort of discover if we're a good fit, and if we are, then what's the right trip for you.
Cool. Well, Mike, let's go back to the 10,000 foot level. We're looking down on a life that you've had in this industry now. Has it been rewarding? Would you change anything?
Yes and no. It is. It has been extremely rewarding. I still to this day get to have these incredible opportunities, incredible experiences, simply because of the career path I've chosen. And just last year I went to Greenland to guinea pig our Arctic Circle fat bike trip. That was one of the most incredible experiences of my life, and that was that was my job that week, was to go and test out this trip in one of the most spectacular places on the planet. So, I've had just these incredible experiences all over the world on my mountain bike, and I've met so many incredible people. And I wouldn't change a thing. Even the hardest parts of it, they've brought me to this day, and they've all been learning opportunities along the way. So I wouldn't change a thing. It's been a real it's been a real blessing to be able to devote my life to something that I love so deeply. And that's really, for a lot of people, it's really hard to say that they feel that deeply connected to what they're doing.
Wow. Well said. And I'm glad that you answered the question that way. There's some risk. You could have said, no, man, it sucked all the way. I don't like this life. But I knew that you had to love it or you wouldn't still be doing it. And what an inspiration to other people who say, yeah, is it possible that I could do what I love and help other people do it too and make a life and a lifestyle out of that? You've done it, and you show other people how to do it. So thanks for that, man. That's awesome. What a great example.
Thank you.
Well, we really appreciate your time today, telling us about mountain biking, about adventure in general, and about your company, and even opening the hood and telling us about your entrepreneurial journey some. I find it inspirational, and I really appreciate your time. So thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Curt. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you, and thanks to you for the opportunity.
Oh, you bet. And for all of our listeners out there, we're always talking about adventure sports, and I always say get out there and have some fun. Maybe your life adventure is starting an adventure-related business of your own. That would be cool. So get out there, have some fun.
Be sure to tune in Thursday when Curt talks with Roger Thompson about adventure travel. Until then, guys, get out and have some fun.